Now let's talk about Sakamoto Days Chapter 215 titled Sea of Corpses and Chapter 216 titled Tunnel. Let's get started. Now that there was no one around because of the shattered aquarium, X and Shin faced each other once more. As he sat, Shin wasn't sure how long he could last against Takamura. Still, he had no choice. If he could even slow him down just a little, then maybe there was still hope. X raised his katana and charged at him. But Shin quickly retreated and took cover behind a pillar, which X effortlessly sliced through. Shin was impressed. Even when he looked into the future, he couldn't track X's movements. He couldn't believe that Nagumo and Sakamoto had managed to fight that beast without any ESP. He clutched his head, thinking that if he lost focus for even a split second, he would be dead on the spot. Just then, X attacked, swinging his katana straight for Shin's head. Luckily, Shin dodged just in time, with the blade only grazing his cheek. Panicked, Shin wondered if his ear had been sliced, and he reached up to check. Thankfully, it was still there. Knowing full well that X was really going to slaughter him, he leapt over the railing and escaped for now. He dove into the water, while X only watched from above, mumbling to himself. As Shin swam through the water, he told himself he just needed to get away for now. But he was startled when he realized he had ended up inside the seal tank. Some children nearby even wondered aloud if he was a caretaker when they saw him there. From Shin's point of view, he could see X approaching, and when he noticed him standing behind the children, Shin screamed, causing a mouthful of water to rush into his mouth. X quickly punched the seal tank, shattering it completely. Shin and the children dodged and moved to the side just in time. The force of the water carried Shin out of the tank, and he was flung across the floor. As he lay face down, X simply stared at him. One of the children who witnessed it began to cry, prompting a nearby man to comment that he had made the kid cry. X turned and gave them a menacing glare. In that brief moment, Shin managed to slip behind him, something that caught X by surprise. Shin told him that his real enemy was now behind him and called him a jerk. While still muttering under his breath, X moved swiftly and slashed at Shin with his katana. Thankfully, Shin ducked and narrowly avoided the strike. However, X ended up slicing one of his own men cleanly. The man's head and gun were both neatly severed. Shin was shocked and asked who that person was. The decapitated man, still somehow speaking, said he had only been trying to support X, whom he called Master. Several more of X's men were present, all armed with guns. They couldn't believe what had just happened to Kato. One of them said they came because they had heard their master, X, was fighting someone. Shin realized that X was reacting to their bloodlust, and so he warned them to stay back, unless they wanted to die. But X's men didn't believe him. One even said it was Shin who's gonna get it. X, still muttering, took his stance again. Meanwhile, as the severed head continued to speak on the floor, X treated it like a golf ball, swinging his katana like a golf club. He launched the head with such force that it struck another of his men standing nearby, slicing his entire body in half upon impact. The remaining men screamed in horror at what had just happened to Seijo. And Shin had been right. X no longer discriminated. He had begun slaughtering even his own allies. The crowd watching was stunned. Shin acted quickly, urging everyone to evacuate. He shouted that everyone needed to run. Shin grew increasingly worried for the civilians in the area, wondering what he should do. He wondered if he should try to hijack X's mind to stop him. But he wasn't sure if that would even work on a monster like him. He imagined what might happen. If he failed, it would be over. But even if he managed to freeze him for just a split second, there was no way he could defeat him alone. If only he had support from his allies. He thought of Asakura and the others and hoped that they were alright. He then ran toward another part of the aquarium, telling himself he couldn't afford to wimp out now. He had to think of something. As he moved, something caught his eye to the side. There was a body floating inside one of the fish tanks. And it wasn't just one, there were countless victims slaughtered by X. Their blood spread through the water, clearly visible through the tunnel aquarium. Their bodies floated alongside the fish inside. Shin couldn't stop himself from sweating out of fear, terrified for his life. Moments later, the entire tank had filled with blood, darkening the color of the water. Shin looked around, trying to locate X, too late to realize he was already above him. X stabbed his katana into the thick glass and targeted Shin again. The strike cracked the glass, and water began leaking out. The two faced each other once more. X emerged from the leaking tank water, while Shin was visibly on edge. He told himself he needed to stay calm and freeze him with his yesbi. However, if X sensed any bloodlust from him, and if his sword moved even slightly faster than Shin's yesbi, he would be dead. Then Shin got distracted when he noticed a woman and a child behind him. He heard the child crying and couldn't believe they had been left behind. Clenching his fist, Shin silently braced himself to make a critical decision. He told them that everything's okay. He knew what he had to do, delay X, at least long enough for Sakamoto to arrive. He had to create even the smallest opening and attack with everything he had. As he stood there thinking, X just stared at him. And right as Shin found the moment to say freeze, X had already swung his katana at Shin's neck, as if his head had been sliced clean off. Once again, Takamura's persona inside X murmured silently. X had already slashed Shin's neck with his katana before Shin could react. As a result, Shin was unable to fight back. His eyes widened when he suddenly felt someone gripping his clothes. It turned out to be Atari, who had suddenly appeared behind him. Strangely, his head was still intact. Shin was puzzled about why Atari was there, and she simply said she was glad she had made it in time. Shin asked her what she was doing there, and more importantly, he was still in shock over what had just happened. In front of him stood the murmuring persona of Takamura inside X. Shin instinctively grabbed his own neck, certain that he had been slashed. So he wondered, how was he still alive? Atari explained that it was due to the tunnel effect, a phenomenon where a particle can penetrate a barrier that should be stronger than its own energy. But the odds of this happening were incredibly small. In other words, the particles of Shin's body and those of the sword had somehow miraculously not collided. Shin was in disbelief by this explanation. He couldn't believe it was even possible for one object to pass through another. Atari insisted that even if the chance was tiny, if something was technically possible, then luck could make it happen. Shin then remembered that Atari had once told him she only had a tiny bit of luck left. Atari confirmed that this was exactly what had just been used. Meanwhile, X was just as bewildered by what had happened. He couldn't believe it either. Atari, sweating nervously, apologized to Shin, saying that because of this miracle, they were now left with some major bad luck. And what she meant by that was the arrival of new Order members at the aquarium. Shin froze when he realized what Atari was talking about. There stood the leader of the Order, Oki, along with Torres, Kuminomi, Gozu, and Tanabata. Shin turned around to look at them, clear anxiety on his face. Torres asked how they had all ended up at the aquarium, calling it a bizarre coincidence. Oki explained that he had a personal policy of using his free time to recharge his batteries, and scientifically speaking, visiting an aquarium was proven to relieve stress. That was why he often came there. Kuminomi said she had seen on social media that a seal pup named Splashy Maru had just been born, so she came to see it. Goza laughed at that, saying it was as if fate had brought them all there. As for himself, Goza said he had just happened to stop by to use the restroom. Torres, on the other hand, said he had been playing sea yarn pachinko and suddenly had a strong urge to smell the sea. When he asked Tanabata why he was there, he was silent at first. Then he said there was no particular reason. He had just planned long ago to visit that aquarium. He wondered if one really needed a special reason to go. He didn't understand why. And so he added that when he got home, he would write a song about that feeling. After everyone explained themselves, Torres asked what exactly was going on, since they had arrived to find Shin and Atari standing face to face with X. In Shin's mind, this really was major bad luck. His situation was already dire, and now they had shown up, too. He was certain there was no way out now. So he started thinking, what should he do next? Kuminomi said it no longer mattered. They had already decided they would kill them the moment they saw them. She then activated her electromagnet gloves to weaponize objects nearby. She targeted a large whale statue hanging above. Using her ability, she loosened the bolts holding it in place and magnetically pulled it toward herself. Gripping the rope attached to the whale, she swung it with all her strength, hurling it toward Shin and Atari. The two of them couldn't dodge in time and were sent flying across to the other side of the aquarium. The people there were startled when a massive whale statue suddenly appeared in front of them, smashing through a wall. Even so, Shin managed to land properly while carrying Atari. But Torres immediately charged at them, commenting on how lively Shin seemed to be today. Shin protected Atari as Torres aimed his sandblaster at both of them. The weapon was extremely powerful, but Shin quickly grabbed a dolphin show sign and used it as a shield. Still, he was hit in the face, and it was clear he was in bad shape. Atari grew worried as Shin collapsed to the ground. Then, something came to Atari's mind. Tearfully, she begged Shin to kill her, something Shin did not expect. Atari explained, with tears in her eyes, that he had been dragged into this situation because of her bad luck. If she were to die, maybe Shin would still have a chance to live. Since Shin had saved him, Atari now wanted to return the favor and save Shin. But Shin simply replied that it wasn't his problem. Besides, he had made a promise to Sakamoto to protect everyone until he returned. More than that, he told Atari that she was misunderstanding things. Atari was confused and didn't know what he meant. Struggling to stand, Shin said that in this world, you had to create your own luck in order to survive. Since Shin was now completely outnumbered, Oki remarked that the situation was hopeless for him. Even his luck had abandoned him. How could a worm like him possibly hope to survive now? Standing before them, Shin paused. Then an idea struck him. He said there was still one way for him to escape this situation.